The metallic tang of refuse and despair clung to the frigid air of Docking Bay 94, a forgotten corner of the sprawling orbital station where lost things and lost people often ended up. Water, thick with grime, wept from rusted pipes overhead, forming greasy puddles amidst mountains of discarded, unlabeled crates and drifts of metallic shaving. Distant, impersonal station announcements, distorted by the echoing vastness, provided a hollow counterpoint to the silence of neglect. Crouched behind a stack of leaking nutrient paste containers, their sickly sweet odor another layer in the bay's foul perfume. Little Astra, an Eliani child with fur, the color of twilight and eyes like purple nebulae, shivered. The gnawing ache in her belly, a hollow, biting thing, was a constant, brutal companion. Her small, three-fingered hands, tipped with delicate black claws, were tucked deep into the thin, matted fur of her chest, seeking a warmth that wasn't there. Every scuttling rat drone, its tiny motor whirring in the shadows, every distant clang of metal on metal from the active docks far beyond, sent a fresh wave of fear, a tightening in her chest that made her breath catch. She was alone, hunted by hunger, and invisible to the station's uncaring thrum. Days, perhaps weeks' time, had become a smear, blurred into a haze of cold and fear since the screams and the shattering light had stolen her parents, leaving only this devouring emptiness and the chilling, absolute certainty that no one was coming for her. Then, a pair of worn heavy work boots, caked with grime and spotted with what looked like old hydraulic fluid, stopped a few feet from her precarious hiding place. A large shadow fell over her, eclipsing the dim emergency light that was her only illumination, and Astra froze, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The shadow commitment into a figure, an elderly human man, his back stooped slightly with age, his weathered face, etched with a lifetime of untold stories, registered surprise as his gaze fell upon the nutrient containers, then sharpened with a dawning, sorrowful understanding as he spotted the tiny, trembling form of the Eliani child. His eyes, a pale, clear blue, held no malice, only a sudden, profound concern that seemed to soften the harsh lines around his mouth. Joshua Davis made no sudden move. He saw the terror in those enormous purple eyes, the way her delicate frame shook. Slowly, deliberately, he crouched, his joints creaking softly in the quiet. From a pouch on his belt he retrieved a small, sealed packet of basic, all-purpose ration bar. With utmost care, he placed it on the grimy floor, a careful arm's length from the edge of the containers. Then, just as slowly, he straightened and stepped back a full 2 paces, demonstrating his lack of aggression. Astra remained frozen, a statue carved from fear. Her luminous eyes, however, darted from the unexpected offering to the still figure of the human, then back to the food. The scent, faint but undeniably food, pricked at her senses. The instinct to flee, to burrow deeper into the refuse, warred violently with the desperate, clawing hunger that had been her only companion for so long. Her weakness was a leaden weight, anchoring her to the spot. Joshua waited, his gaze gentle, unwavering. He saw the protruding ridges of her spine beneath the thin fur, the hollows in her tiny face, the almost translucent quality of her large, pointed ears. He recognized the signs of advanced starvation, the deep shock in her eyes. She wouldn't last another cycle out here. An unspoken decision, heavy as a bulkhead door, settled in his chest. He could not abandon her. He simply couldn't. Moving with a slowness that was almost painful, Joshua began to speak, his voice a low, soft murmur, the words themselves unimportant, lost to the vastness of the bay, but the tone designed to soothe, to reassure. "Easy now, little one. Just want to help." He took a careful step, then another. Astra flinched but didn't bolt. When he was close enough, he extended his hands, palms open, and with infinite care he scooped up the incredibly light, still terrified child. She was little more than bones and fur, trembling violently, a faint, high-pitched keen escaping her. He gathered the tattered piece of synth fabric she'd been nestled in along with her, a meager shield against the cold. Clutching the trembling bundle to his chest, Joshua turned and moved through the less frequented service corridors and echoing backways of Docking Bay 94. His steps were sure, his knowledge of the station's hidden paths evident as he skillfully avoided the occasional sanitation drone or the distant hum of a security patrol. Astra, a silent, shivering weight, was pressed against the rough fabric of his work jacket, her strange, wide eyes reflecting the dim, flickering lights of the service tunnels. Finally, he reached a nondescript door, swiped an old-fashioned keycard, and it hissed open. Joshua's dwelling was revealed, a small, somewhat cluttered, but undeniably clean and well-kept hab unit. A shelf held a few old, physical datapad books, their spines cracked from use. On a small table, a single, surprisingly resilient potted plant with broad dark green leaves reached towards the soft glow of a desk lamp. A worn but comfortable-looking armchair sat in one corner. The air here was warmer, cleaner, a stark, immediate contrast to the metallic filth and chill of the docking bay. It was a space of order, of modest, lived-in comfort. Gently, Joshua placed Astra in a makeshift nest he quickly fashioned from clean cloths, in a quiet, dim corner of the room, away from the main light. He offered her a small cup with a tiny amount of water, then, breaking off a minuscule piece of the ration bar, held it out. As he got his first proper, close look at her alien features, the delicate, almost feathery antennae that twitched near her temples, the way her twilight fur swirled in intricate patterns, the slight, iridescent sheen to her skin, the profound realization hit him with the force of a sudden decompression. He knew nothing about Eliani physiology, nothing of their diet, their tolerances, their needs. The challenge ahead loomed, immense and unknown. Overwhelmed by fear, starvation, the strange journey, and now the sudden shift to a relatively warmer, safer environment, Astra's meager strength finally gave out. Her luminous eyes fluttered, unfocused, then rolled back. Her small body went limp, and she succumbed to utter exhaustion, fainting or falling into a deep, troubled sleep, her fragile state alarmingly apparent against the clean white cloths. Joshua stood over the unconscious Eliani child, his weathered face a mask of deep compassion, profound worry, and the sudden, heavy weight of responsibility. He looked at the tiny alien being, so far from anything he understood, yet so undeniably in need. This single, impulsive act of kindness, he knew with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, had irrevocably changed the quiet, solitary course of his life. His gaze lingered on Astra's still form, the unspoken questions of how to care for her, what dangers this might bring, and what the future now held, hanging heavy in the silence of his small hab unit. And fruit alone wouldn't be enough. Joshua carefully examined the unconscious child. Her breathing was shallow, each rise and fall of her small chest barely perceptible. Her fur, the color of twilight, was matted and thin in places, revealing patches of pale skin beneath. When he lifted her slightly to adjust the makeshift bedding, her body felt unnaturally light, like a bird with hollow bone. She was severely malnourished, dehydrated, and needed immediate attention beyond what he could guess at. He dampened a clean cloth with a human electrolyte solution, a standard first aid item in any station hab unit, and gently dabbed it on her lips. Nothing. She didn't respond, her mouth remaining slack, and he worried she might be too weak to swallow, the liquid simply pooling and potentially choking her. Joshua remembered basic biology lessons from his childhood, Holovid lectures about xenobiology. LNI physiology was likely vastly different from human. Their digestive systems, their respiratory needs. Forcing human food or fluids into her could be fatal, the equivalent of poison. He stopped, pulling the cloth away. He couldn't risk it. He cursed under his breath and retrieved his datapad, its cracked screen a testament to its age and his limited resources. He searched for any information on Eliani physiology or dietary needs, but his access was limited. Most of the information was either highly technical, filled with jargon he barely understood, or restricted to authorized personnel with higher security clearances. He scrolled through endless articles on Eliani trade routes and cultural practices, finding nothing immediately useful about their basic biology. Improvisation was his only option. He decided to try a process of elimination, offering Astra small amounts of different readily available substances. He gathered a small bowl of water. A dollop of diluted nutrient paced the bland, gray staple of station life, a piece of luminescent blue fruit he'd bartered for from a down-station vendor, and a small amount of unflavored protein gel, usually used for wound dressing. Astra remained unconscious, but as he held the piece of fruit near her nose, he saw a slight reaction. A faint twitch of her nose, almost imperceptible, and a barely perceptible shift in her fur color near her ears, a subtle deepening of the twilight hue. Joshua noted this carefully, his heart quickening. He gently mashed the fruit into a pulp using the back of a spoon, careful to remove any seeds or tough skin. Then, using a clean fingertip, he carefully placed a tiny amount on Astra's tongue. He held his breath, watching. After a long moment, she weakly swallowed, her throat muscles barely contracting. Over the next hour, Joshua continued to administer small amounts of the fruit pulp, carefully monitoring Astra's breathing and skin tone for any adverse reactions. He also gently dabbed water on her lips, which she slowly licked off, her tongue a tiny, rasping thing. Her skin seemed to retain the moisture, as if pulling it straight in. He noticed that Astra's body temperature was low, even for the station's frigid environment. He adjusted the HAB unit's thermostat to its maximum setting, the ancient device groaning in protest, and draped a soft, clean cloth, one of the few items he kept meticulously laundered over her to provide additional warmth, tucking it around her small form like a protective cocoon. After several hours, Astra stirred. A soft, distressed whimper escaped her lips, a sound unlike anything Joshua had ever heard, a series of clicks and whistles in a language he didn't understand. Her eyelids fluttered, then opened, revealing her large, luminous purple irises, like twin nebulae trapped in miniature. Her eyes widened in terror as she focused on Joshua, her pupils dilating. She tried to scramble away, pushing herself back against the wall, but her weakness prevented her from moving more than a few inches. Another frightened vocalization, a high-pitched keening sound, filled the small space. Joshua immediately stopped moving, Holding his hands up in a gesture of peace, he spoke in a soft, soothing tone, even though he knew Astra didn't understand his words. "Easy, little one, it's all right. You're safe now." He kept his movements slow and deliberate, avoiding any sudden gestures that might frighten her further. He slowly offered Astra a small piece of the fruit pulp on his open palm, keeping his distance and allowing her to approach if she chose. He held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. Astra's eyes darted between the fruit and Joshua's face, her expression a mixture of intense hunger and deep-seated fear. She trembled visibly, her small body shaking, but her stomach growled audibly, a low rumbling sound that highlighted her desperate need for food. After a long moment of hesitation, her gaze steady on Joshua's face, Astra slowly reached out a small, trembling hand, her fingers tipped with delicate claws, and took the fruit pulp from his palm. She ate it tentatively, her eyes still fixed on him, as if expecting him to snatch it away at any moment. Joshua felt a wave of relief wash over him, so intense it almost made him weak. It was a small victory, a tiny spark of hope in the darkness, but it signified a potential turning point in her recovery, and a first step towards building trust. After finishing the small amount of fruit, Astra's eyelids drooped, and she succumbed to exhaustion once more, falling back into a fitful sleep, her breathing still shallow but slightly more regular. Joshua sat beside Astra's makeshift nest, watching over her as she slept. The challenges ahead were daunting, a mountain of unknowns stretching before him. He needed to learn so much, and quickly. But he was determined to do everything in his power to care for this orphaned alien child, to give her a chance at a life she deserved. He wondered if anyone on the station knew how to help, if there were others like her, if there was any hope of finding her people. As Astra slept, she whimpered and thrashed slightly, her brow furrowed. She repeated one word like sound over and over in her sleep, her voice a mere whisper. It sounded vaguely like kale. Joshua made a mental note, sensing it might be important, a clue to her past, a name perhaps. Joshua looked at Astra's sleeping form, knowing that fruit alone would not be enough to sustain her long term. He needed to find a reliable source of appropriate nutrition, something more substantial, something that could truly nourish her, and he needed to do it quickly. Joshua spent the night in a low chair, pulled close to the makeshift nest of blankets he'd created for Astra, the dim emergency light casting long shadows across the cramped HAB unit. He checked her temperature with the back of his hand, the twilight-colored fur soft beneath his touch. Her breathing was shallow but steady, a small comfort. He coaxed a few more drops of diluted fruit pulp between her lips, watching as she swallowed weakly. While stable, she was far from recovered. The fruit pulp was mostly water and sugar. It wouldn't sustain her for long. She needed something more complete, a balanced diet. He needed to find something that met the specific needs of her alien physiology, and soon. A steadfast perseverance settled in his chest. He wouldn't let her fade. Not after finding her. The first rays of artificial dawn painted the station corridors in hues of pale orange as Joshua slipped out of his HAB unit. He left Astra sleeping, a small, vulnerable form curled amidst the blankets, the silence of the room pressed down on him, heavy with responsibility. He reinforced the door as best he could, a futile gesture against any serious threat, but it was all he could do for now. The station was already thrumming with activity. Workers shuffled to their shifts, their faces etched with exhaustion or grim purpose. The air hung thick with the smells of recycled air, grease, and stale synth coffee. He entered the station canteen, hoping to find someone, anyone who might recognize Astra's species or offer a suggestion. The canteen was a cacophony of clattering utensils, shouted orders, and the drone of a dozen different languages. Faces, human and alien, blurred together in a sea of indifference. He approached a few patrons, showing a crude drawing of Astra he'd sketched on a napkin. "Have you seen a child like this? Do you know what she eats?" He was met with shrugs, blank stares, or dismissive waves. Discouraged, Joshua was about to leave when a splash of color caught his eye. Tucked away in a corner was a small vendor stall, overflowing with exotic fruits and vegetables he'd never seen before. The vendor, a tall, spindly alien with iridescent scales and shrewd eyes, was meticulously arranging his wares. Hesitantly, Joshua approached. "Excuse me," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "I'm looking for information. I found a child, an alien. I think she's Eliani." The vendor paused, his multifaceted eyes focusing on Joshua with unsettling intensity. "Eliani, you say? Those are rare these days." He stroked a long, chitinous chin. "Show me." Joshua pulled out the napkin sketch. The vendor examined it closely, his scales rippling slightly. "Yes, that is an Eliani. Fur the color of twilight, eyes like nebulae. They require a specific diet. Certain trace minerals are essential to their health. Without them, they weaken quickly. Do you know where I can find these?" "Minerals?" Joshua asked, his voice filled with desperate hope. The vendor's gaze shifted, becoming guarded. "The Eliani were once common on this station, but that was before the Troubles. After the political upheaval on their homeworld, most either left or disappeared. You might find specialized food supplies on the black market, but be warned, human. It's a dangerous place." Back in the Hab unit, the silence was shattered by a piercing scream. Joshua rushed to Astra's side, finding her thrashing in her sleep, her small body slick with sweat. She was repeating a sound, a word like utterance, over and over. "Kyle, Kyle." Joshua gently shook her awake, his heart aching at her terror. "It's all right, little one. You're safe now. It was just a dream." Astra's eyes snapped open, wide with fear. She stared at him, unseeing, her breathing ragged. The word, "Kyle," escaped her lips again, a mournful whisper. Joshua tried to soothe her, stroking her fur and murmuring reassurances. "Kyle? What is Kyle? Can you show me?" He gestured with his hands, trying to convey his meaning. Astra remained terrified, her eyes darting around the room as if she were still trapped in the nightmare. She didn't seem to understand. Desperate to break through her fear, Joshua rummaged through his meager belongings, finding a scrap of paper and a broken crayon. He offered them to Astra. "Draw, little one. Show me Kale." Hesitantly, Astra took the crayon and paper. Her small hand trembled as she began to draw. The image was simple, almost childlike, but it sent a jolt of recognition through Joshua. It was a stylized flower with 4 petals, each a different shade of purple. Joshua quickly retrieved his datapad, his fingers flying across the screen as he searched for images of flowers. After several minutes, he found a reference to a rare Eliani flower called the Kalan bloom. The description mentioned its medicinal properties and its cultural significance to the Eliani people. The black market. He had to risk it. Astra needed specialized food, and Kyle might be the key to unlocking her past, to helping her heal. He couldn't ignore either need. He reinforced the door again, adding a makeshift brace he fashioned from a piece of scrap metal. It wouldn't stop a determined intruder, but it might buy him some time. He gathered the remaining fruit, pulp, and water, placing them within Astra's reach. "I'll be back soon, little starflower," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I promise. Joshua paused at the doorway, his hand hovering over the release. He hated leaving her alone, vulnerable. What if something happened while he was gone? What if she woke up and panicked? He knelt down, looking into her large, luminous eyes. I have to go, Astra, but I'll be back as soon as I can. You'll be safe here. He hoped she understood. As Joshua slipped out of the HAB unit, Astra whimpered, reaching out a small hand towards him. Her eyes were filled with a fear that mirrored his own. She didn't want to be alone again. Joshua navigated the station's underbelly, following the vendor's vague directions. The corridors were dark and grimy, the air thick with the stench of decay and desperation. Shadowy figures lurked in the corners, their eyes glinting in the dim light. He felt a knot of unease tighten in his stomach. He found the entrance to the black market, a nondescript door tucked away at the end of a long, deserted corridor. Two heavily armed aliens stood guard, their faces impassive. One of them stepped forward, blocking his path. "Password," he growled, his voice a low rumble. Joshua hesitated. He didn't know the password. I don't have it," he stammered. The guard raised his weapon, a menacing-looking blaster. "Then you don't pass." Joshua's mind raced. He couldn't turn back. He had to get inside. He glanced at the door's locking mechanism, a complex array of wires and circuits. A flicker of inspiration ignited in his eyes. He might not know the password, but he knew how to bypass a security system. With a swift movement, Joshua pulled out a small multi-tool from his pocket and began to work on the door's control panel. The guards watched him with suspicion, their weapons trained on his chest. He ignored them, his focus laser-sharp as he manipulated the wires, his fingers moving with practiced ease. A moment later, the door hissed open. Joshua stepped inside, leaving the stunned guards behind. The black market was a chaotic and dangerous place, a sprawling labyrinth of stalls and passageways filled with illicit goods and shady individuals. The air was thick with the smells of exotic spices, cheap fuel and desperation. Joshua felt immediately out of place, a lamb in a den of wolves. Back in the HAB unit, Astra sat alone in the darkness, clutching the drawing of the Kalan bloom. She whimpered softly, her large eyes fixed on the door, waiting for Joshua to return, unaware of the dangers he faced. The HAB unit's recycled air tasted stale after the relative freshness of the docking bay, but Joshua knew the station's air recyclers were failing. One more consequence of deferred maintenance. He needed to get Astra proper nutrition, and fast, which meant a trip to the black market. Navigating the crowd overwhelmed by the black market. The black market throbbed like a festering wound in the station's underbelly. The air, thick with the cloying sweetness of exotic spices and the sharp tang of illicit chemicals, pressed down on Joshua. 1,000 voices, a babble of languages he couldn't identify, much less understand, clawed at his ears. The press of bodies was relentless. Hulking Krog mercenaries jostled elbows with spindly, multi-limbed Xylar merchants, their chitinous exoskeletons clicking against his worn jacket. Flickering neon signs cast lurid shadows that danced across the grimy floor, illuminating piles of stolen tech, smuggled goods, and things he didn't even want to imagine. He winced, pulling his cap lower, trying to shield himself from the sensory onslaught. Seeking information, a risky inquiry, he spotted a vendor, hawking a jumbled assortment of goods, energy weapons, datapads, questionable pharmaceuticals. The vendor, a squat, reptilian being with beady eyes and a perpetually suspicious expression, polished a plasma pistol with a greasy rag. Joshua approached cautiously. "Excuse me," he rasped, his voice barely audible above the din. "I'm looking for specialized food for Eliani refugees. The vendor's suspicion, a test of trust." The vendor's beady eyes flicked up, assessing Joshua with predatory interest. He stopped polishing the pistol. "Eliani, eh? Rare breed out this way. What's your interest?" He leaned closer, a sour odor emanating from his scaled skin. "Tell me, old man, what's the significance of the Tears of Lyra ceremony to the Eliani people?" Joshua frowned, genuinely confused. He hadn't a clue. "Look, I don't know anything about ceremonies. I just found a child, starving. I'm trying to help her." Joshua's honesty, revealing Astra's story. He met the vendor's gaze, his own unwavering. "She's just a kid, orphaned. I don't know what happened to her family, but she needs food. Real food, not station rations." The words were simple, but the sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. He hoped, prayed, it would be enough. The vendor's revelation of potential source. The vendor studied him for a long moment, his reptilian features unreadable. Finally he grunted, Maybe I know someone who deals in specialized goods and knows a thing or two about the Eliani. No promises, old man. This ain't charity." A flicker of something that might have been empathy crossed the vendor's face, quickly replaced by his usual guarded expression. A shady contact meeting Zara. The vendor led Joshua through a labyrinthine maze of stalls and shadowy alleys, the crowd thinning as they ventured deeper into the market's heart. They stopped before a curtained doorway hidden behind a stack of deactivated combat drones. "Zara's inside. Be careful. She doesn't like wasting time." He gestured towards the curtain. Joshua pushed aside the heavy fabric and stepped into a dimly lit chamber. The air here was thick with the scent of incense and something metallic. Zara sat behind a low table, her face obscured by shadow. She was tall and slender, with skin the color of polished obsidian and eyes that glowed with an eerie inner light. A network of intricate tattoos covered her arms, pulsing faintly with a soft blue light. "You seek information," she said, her voice a low melodic hum, "and perhaps more. Zara's knowledge, the Eliani uprising." Joshua cut to the chase. "I need Eliani food supplements, and I'm trying to find out about the Kalan bloom." Zara tilted her head, her eyes gleaming in the dim light. The Kalan bloom, a rare delicacy and a potent medicine, used by the Eliani rebels during the unpleasantness, the uprising on Kalan Prime. A long time ago. She said it as if discussing the weather, but Joshua heard the weight in her words. Zara's price information for a favor. "I can help you," Zara continued, her voice a silken thread. "But information and specialized goods come at a price. I require a favor, a simple task, easily within your capabilities. The favor repairing a device." Zara gestured to a corner of the chamber where a workbench was cluttered with wires, circuit boards, and half-disassembled tech. "I need you to repair this." She indicated a small, intricately crafted device, its casing cracked and wires dangling. "It's essential to my business." Joshua's suspicion, a hidden agenda. He examined the device closely. It was a sophisticated communication interceptor, designed to tap into secure transmissions. His gut clenched. Zara was involved in something far more dangerous than simple trading. He hesitated, Completing the task a bargain is struck, but Astra, he had to think of Astra. He took a deep breath. "All right," he said, his voice tight. "I'll fix it." He spent the next hour hunched over the workbench, his skilled hands coaxing the damaged device back to life. As he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was making a deal with the devil. Eliani food acquired a balanced diet. When he was finished, Zara examined the device, her eyes glowing with satisfaction. Excellent. As promised, she produced a small, sealed container filled with nutrient-rich supplements specifically formulated for Eliani biology. The Kalen Bloom lead a hidden garden. "And the Kalen Bloom?" Joshua asked. Zara smiled, a chillingly beautiful expression. "A difficult find, extremely rare. But there is a botanical garden in the derelict sector, long abandoned, overgrown. The Kalen Bloom might still be there. A warning dangers of the garden. But be warned," Zara added, her voice suddenly serious. "The garden is a dangerous place. Mutated plants, scavengers, things that have changed. Proceed with caution." Astra's drawing a glowing bloom. Back in the Hab unit, Astra was drawing on a scrap of salvaged metal. This time the familiar Kalen Bloom was bathed in a soft, bioluminescent glow, the petals shimmering with an ethereal light. He stared at the drawing, a chill running down his spine. Joshua's return relief and gratitude. Joshua stepped inside, relieved to find Astra safe. She looked up, her purple eyes widening with joy. She rushed towards him, wrapping her small arms around his leg and nuzzling against his worn trousers. Sharing the food Astra's improved condition, he prepared a small meal using the Eliani supplements, mixing them with purified water. Astra devoured it eagerly, her eyes shining with newfound energy. He could already see a difference. Her fur seemed brighter, her movements more fluid. The botanical garden decision a necessary risk. The Kalen Bloom, it was more than just medicine. It was a key to Astra's past, perhaps even to her future. He had to find it, no matter the risk. Preparing for the journey a makeshift weapon, he rummaged through his meager belongings, scavenging for anything that could be used as a weapon. He found a length of metal pipe and a discarded energy cell. With a few modifications, he fashioned a crude but functional stun baton. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Leaving for the garden a promise to return, he knelt down, looking Astra in the eyes. "I'll be back soon, Starflower," he said, his voice filled with perseverance. "I promise." He kissed her gently on the forehead and turned towards the door, steeling himself for the dangers that lay ahead. The derelict sector and the secrets of the botanical garden awaited. The station's automated lights flickered erratically as Joshua made his way toward the derelict sector, each failing bulb casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe with a life of their own. Rust ate at the metal bulkheads, and the hum of the station's life support system was noticeably weaker here, replaced by a musty, almost earthy smell. It was a forgotten place, a stark contrast to the polished corridors closer to the central hub. He reached the entrance to the botanical garden, or what was left of it. A sign, half-eaten by corrosion, still proclaimed Botanical Research, but the doorway was now a twisted mess of metal and what looked like mutated vines, thicker than any he'd ever seen. They pulsed with a faint, sickly green light. He ran a hand over the corroded panel beside the door, finding the manual override. With a grunt, he forced the emergency release. The door groaning open just enough for him to squeeze through. The air inside was thick and humid, heavy with the scent of decay and overripe fruit. Bioluminescent fungi clung to every surface, casting an eerie glow on the distorted ecosystem. Carnivorous plants, easily twice the size they should be, snapped their jaws, and clouds of pollen, shimmering with an unnatural iridescence, drifted through the air. He pulled his rebreather tighter. This place was sick. He wasn't alone. In the distance he saw a group of figures huddled around a cluster of mutated fruit trees. They were thin, their faces gaunt, their clothes little more than rags. Scavengers. As he moved closer, one of them spotted him. A tense silence fell over the group. They exchanged wary glances, then, with surprising speed, they moved to intercept him. 3 of them, armed with rusty pipes and scavenged tools, blocked his path. "Hold it right there, old man," one of them snarled, his voice raspy. "Anything you got is ours now." Joshua sighed. He'd hoped to avoid this. He hefted the makeshift weapon he'd cobbled together, a stun baton modified with a focusing lens. "I don't want any trouble. I'm just passing through." "Trouble's what you found," another one spat, stepping closer. "We haven't eaten a decent meal in weeks. You look like you got supplies." They lunged. Joshua reacted quickly, sidestepping the first attacker and bringing the stun baton down on his arm. The scavenger yelped and dropped his pipe. He spun, kicking out at the legs of the second, sending him stumbling. The third came at him with a rusty knife. Joshua parried the blow with the baton, the focusing lens emitting a blinding flash of light. The scavenger cried out, clutching his eyes. He could have done more, could have seriously injured them, but he held back. He wasn't here to hurt anyone. "I said I don't want any trouble," he repeated, his voice firm. The scavengers, disoriented but not seriously hurt, backed away, nursing their injuries. "What do you want?" the first one asked, his voice filled with suspicion. "I'm looking for something," Joshua said. "Something that can help someone who needs it." The scavengers looked at each other, then back at Joshua. "Help?" one of them scoffed. "There's no help here. Just desperation." "We used to think the station took care of its own," another said bitterly. "Now look at us, driven to eating mutated garbage in this hellhole." Joshua's face softened. "I know things are bad, but that doesn't mean we have to give up on each other." The first scavenger, the one who seemed to be the leader, hesitated. "There's nothing here worth dying for," he said finally. "Just dangers. Deeper in the garden, there's a creature. Territorial. Protects something. Valuable." "What kind of creature?" Joshua asked. The scavenger shrugged. "Don't know. Never seen it. Just heard the stories. It ain't natural, whatever it is." Joshua felt a faint nudge in his mind, a sense of direction, a pull towards the deeper parts of the garden. It was Astra. She was guiding him. "Thank you," he said to the scavengers, "for the warning." He turned and started to walk away, following the faint psychic pull. The deeper he went, the more pronounced the bioluminescence became. Patches of fungi glowing with an ethereal light marked a path through the twisted vegetation. It was almost beautiful in a strange, unsettling way. The fungi seemed to react to his presence, their glow intensifying as he approached, then dimming as he passed. A heavy stillness settled over the garden. The air grew thick and oppressive, and the mutated plants seemed to bristle with hostility. He could feel it, an ominous presence, a sense of being watched. He had entered the Guardian's territory. Then he saw it. A hulking shape, half hidden in the shadows. It was massive, easily 10 feet tall, and resembled a grotesque fusion of reptile and plant. Its body was covered in thick, thorny vines, and glowing spores pulsed from its skin. Its eyes, reptilian and cold, fixed on him. The guardian roared, a sound that vibrated through the very ground beneath his feet. The vines lashed out with surprising speed, tearing through the air. Spores erupted from its body, releasing a cloud of hallucinogenic gas. Joshua ducked and weaved, narrowly avoiding the vines. He stumbled back, coughing as the gas filled his lungs. The world swam around him, colors intensified, and the plants seemed to mock him with their distorted shapes. He had to focus. He scrambled behind a cluster of oversized carnivorous plants, using them as cover. The guardian roared again, tearing the plants apart with its vines. Joshua grabbed a handful of the glowing fungi and hurled it at the creature. The fungi burst on impact, releasing a cloud of blinding light. The guardian recoiled, momentarily disoriented. He had to find a way to disable it, not kill it. Astra's presence in his mind intensified. A flood of images and sensations, a sense of vulnerability, a point of weakness. He understood. The creature wasn't inherently aggressive. It was protecting something, something precious, and it was in pain. He focused, channeling Astra's empathy. He could feel the creature's fear, its loneliness, its desperate need to protect. He took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the carnivorous plants, holding his hands up in a gesture of peace. "I don't want to hurt you," he said, his voice clear despite the hallucinogenic gas. "I just need what you're protecting." The guardian hesitated, its reptilian eyes narrowing. It lowered its head, sniffing the air. Then slowly, cautiously, it stepped aside, revealing what it had been guarding. A single flower, glowing with a soft, ethereal light. The Kalan bloom. It pulsed with a gentle energy, radiating a sense of peace and healing. Joshua approached slowly, sensing its delicate nature. He reached out, his fingers brushing against its petals. He could feel its energy flowing into him, guided by Astra's connection. He carefully plucked the bloom from its stem, feeling a pang of regret for disturbing it, but knowing it was for a greater good. He turned and started to walk back. The Kalan bloom clutched carefully in his hand. The guardian watched him go, then slowly retreated back into the shadows. As he emerged from the botanical garden back into the derelict sector, he saw a figure standing in the distance, partially obscured by the shadows. It was Zara. She was watching him. He couldn't read her expression, but he knew she had seen him. What was she planning? He quickened his pace, a sense of urgency filling him. He had the Kalan bloom. Now he had to get back to Astra. Joshua burst back into the hab unit, the faint scent of the Kalan bloom clinging to his worn jacket. Astra hadn't moved. If anything, the dim purple glow that usually emanated from her fur seemed even fainter, almost extinguished. Her breathing was shallow, ragged, the rise and fall of her small chest barely perceptible. He moved quickly, setting the makeshift mortar and pestle on the small table he used for repairs. The bloom, carefully extracted from its makeshift terrarium, pulsed with a faint internal light. It was a delicate process, crushing the petals just enough to release their potent compounds, without destroying them entirely. He remembered the botanical gardens from his youth, the hushed reverence of the caretakers, the precise measurements they used. He tried to channel that now, his large, calloused hands moving with surprising gentleness. He mixed the crushed bloom with a sterile solution he'd managed to scavenge from the station's medical waste disposal, a risky proposition. But he'd sterilized it 3 times over. The resulting serum was a cloudy, pale green. He drew a small amount into a repurposed injector, the kind used for delivering nutrient supplements to livestock. Crude, but it would have to do. He knelt beside Astra, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Easy, little starflower," he murmured, his voice rough with anxiety. He gently stroked her fur, trying to soothe her. He positioned the injector against her thin arm, hesitating for a moment. He pushed the plunger, administering a small dose of the serum. He waited, watching her closely. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Her breathing remained shallow. The faint glow didn't return. Nothing. He cursed under his breath, a harsh, guttural sound. He accessed the station's medical database on his ancient datapad, his fingers flying across the cracked screen. Limited information. Contradictory information. Vague references to Eliani physiology. Even vaguer mentions of the Kylan bloom's properties. One entry, buried deep in a xenobotanical study, suggested a higher concentration might be necessary, but another warned of potentially fatal side effects. He stared at the screen, his brow furrowed in concentration. It was a gamble, a desperate one, but he couldn't just stand by and watch her fade away. He carefully drew another dose of the serum, slightly larger this time. He knew the risks. He knew he could be making things worse, but he also knew he couldn't live with himself if he didn't try. He administered the increased dosage. Almost immediately, Astra convulsed. Her small body arched, her fur overflowing. A sharp, keening sound escaped her lips, a sound of pure, unadulterated pain. The purple light flared intensely, then flickered and died. Joshua recoiled, his face etched with horror. "No, no, no," he whispered, his voice choked with despair. He'd made a mistake. He'd hurt her. He'd made everything worse. He was a fool, an old fool playing doctor with something he didn't understand. He lowered the injector, his hands trembling. He gently stroked Astra's fur, whispering soothing words, his voice thick with regret. He monitored her vital signs on the datapad, his eyes scanning the numbers with frantic intensity. As Astra rested, her breathing shallow but steady, images flickered behind her closed eyelids. Fragmented memories, vivid and disjointed. A lush, green world, bathed in the light of twin suns. Towering trees with bioluminescent leaves. Other Eliani children, laughing and playing. Then darkness, explosions, screams, a frantic escape, a ship burning. The dream faded, leaving her restless. A soft chime echoed through the hab unit. The door panel blinked, indicating an incoming visitor. Joshua frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. He cautiously approached the door and activated the visual feed. A woman stood in the corridor, her face etched with concern. She was human, middle-aged, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She wore simple, utilitarian clothing. "Joshua Davis?" she asked, her voice calm and steady. "My name is Zara. I understand you're caring for an Eliani child." Joshua hesitated, suspicion clouding his features. "Who are you? How did you know?" "It's not important," Zara replied. "What is important is the child's well-being. I have some knowledge of Eliani medicine. I believe I can help." Joshua remained wary. "I don't need your help." "Perhaps not," Zara conceded, "but I suspect you're unaware of the full extent of her condition. She suffers from a rare genetic anomaly, one that requires a specific and difficult-to-obtain treatment." Joshua's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "It's a complex matter," Zara said. "But suffice it to say that without the proper care, her chances of survival are slim." She paused. I have access to resources, to expertise that you don't, but I need your cooperation. And something in return. What do you want? Joshua asked, his voice imbued with suspicion. Zara's expression turned serious. Let's just say that Astra's survival is crucial. Crucial for the future of her people. There are powerful forces at play here, Mr. Davis. Forces you can't even imagine. Despite the setbacks, despite the fear, Joshua noticed something. Astra's breathing was a little easier. Her fur, though still dim, had regained a faint shimmer, a hint of its former glory. Zara noticed it too. Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. Remarkable, she murmured. You've managed to stabilize her, at least temporarily. She turned back to Joshua, her expression resolute. I can offer you a chance to save her life, Mr. Davis, but it comes at a price. Are you willing to pay it? Joshua hesitated, torn between his distrust of Zara and his desperate desire to save Astra. He looked at the small, fragile, alien child lying on his cot, her fate hanging in the balance. What was he willing to risk? What was he willing to sacrifice? He didn't know. Not yet. Joshua stared at Zara, then back at Astra, sleeping soundly in the makeshift bed he'd created from scavenged blankets. The soft, rhythmic pulse of her bioluminescence was the only sound in the small space, a fragile beacon in the station's cold indifference. He touched the small wooden starflower he'd carved for her, the rough texture grounding him. His thoughts churned. Trust Zara, a woman he'd met only hours ago, a woman with secrets etched into the very lines of her face. Desperation gnawed at him, though. Astra needed help, help he couldn't provide alone. He took a deep breath, the recycled air heavy in his lung. All right, he said, his voice raspy. I'll cooperate, but on my terms. Zara nodded, her violet eyes intense. Of course. What are your conditions? Full transparency, Joshua said, his gaze unwavering. I want to know everything. No half-truths, no omissions. And, he added, his voice hardening, if I think for 1 second that you're putting Astra in danger, I walk. Understand? Understood, Zara replied, her expression serious. I assure you, her well-being is my priority as well. She paused, then continued, Astra carries a specific genetic marker, a rare allele unique to her lineage. It's this marker that makes her crucial. Crucial for what? Joshua asked, suspicion lacing his tone. For developing a cure, Zara explained. There's a rare Eliane condition, a degenerative disease that affects only a small percentage of the population. This marker, it holds the key to unlocking a cure. She projected a shimmering holographic image, a complex helix of intertwined strands. This is it. This is what we need to understand. Zara led him through the station's labyrinthine corridors, deeper into its mechanical heart. Pipes hissed, cables snaked across the walls, and the air grew thick with the scent of ozone and decay. This way, she said, her voice low. I have connections. They arrived at a reinforced door, unmarked and hidden behind a stack of discarded cargo containers. Zara entered a code, and the door hissed open, revealing a dimly lit medical facility, far more advanced than anything Joshua had seen on this station. This facility is restricted, Zara said, her voice barely a whisper, but it contains the diagnostic equipment we need. Inside, the air hummed with the low thrum of machinery. Zara guided Joshua to a large cylindrical scanner. Place her inside, she instructed. This will give us a complete physiological profile. As Astra lay within the scanner, bathed in its ethereal glow, Zara explained the complex nature of her condition. The genetic marker is causing a cascade of physiological imbalances, she said, pointing to the holographic displays. It's affecting her nutrient absorption, her energy regulation, even her cognitive development. Without intervention, the effects will be irreversible. Zara outlined a potential treatment plan, a complex combination of specialized nutrients, targeted gene therapy, and a rare Eliani artifact. This artifact, she said, it's a bioresonator. It can help stabilize her energy pathways and enhance the effects of the gene therapy. Where do we get this stuff? Joshua asked, his brow furrowed. The nutrients and gene therapy are available on the black market, Zara replied. The artifact, that will be more difficult. It's heavily guarded. Navigating the station's underbelly was a descent into a world of shadows and whispers. Joshua and Zara moved through crowded marketplaces, their senses on high alert. They bartered with shady merchants, exchanged coded phrases, and avoided the watchful eyes of station security. This is the only way, Zara said, handing Joshua a small vial filled with a shimmering liquid. It's the gene therapy, but it came at a price. What price? Joshua asked, his gaze hardening. To acquire this, Zara said, I had to divert resources from another patient. A child like Astra who needs life-saving treatment. Joshua's fists tight. You deprived someone else of help? It was a necessary sacrifice, Zara insisted, her voice firm. Astra's needs are greater. She's not just another patient. She's a symbol of hope. As they returned to the facility, Astra suddenly cried out, her body convulsing. Images flashed before her eyes, a grand hall, gleaming with polished metal and shimmering light, figures in ornate robes, their faces contorted with anger and betrayal, a single gunshot echoing through the chamber. Zara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. What was that? Joshua asked, his voice tight with concern. I recognize those figures, Zara stammered, her eyes wide with shock. They were leaders of the Eliani colony. Before what? Joshua pressed, his suspicions rising. Zara hesitated, her gaze darting nervously. Before the destruction, she whispered. Before the factional war. Factional war? Joshua repeated, his voice infused with disbelief. What are you talking about? Zara took a deep breath, her shoulders slumping. I haven't been entirely honest with you, Joshua. I belong to a rebel faction, fighting against a tyrannical regime that orchestrated the destruction of Astra's colony. They wanted to silence any opposition, any voice of dissent. And Astra? Joshua asked, his voice barely a whisper. What does she have to do with this? Astra is a descendant of a revered Eliani leader, a symbol of hope for our faction. That's why they targeted her family. That's why she's so important. She represents a future free from tyranny. They began the gene therapy procedure, their movements precise and deliberate. Zara calibrated the equipment, her brow furrowed in concentration. Joshua monitored Astra's vital signs, his heart pounding in his chest. Suddenly alarms blared and the facility plunged into darkness. System failure, Zara shouted, her voice filled with panic. The energy regulator has overloaded. Astra's bioluminescence flickered erratically, her body convulsing. We have to stabilize her, Joshua yelled, his mind racing. He grabbed a discarded power cable, stripping away the insulation with his bare hands. He rerouted the energy flow, bypassing the damaged regulator. Sparks flew and the air crackled with electricity. "It's working," Zara exclaimed, her voice filled with relief. "The system is stabilizing." Zara turned to Joshua, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You saved her, Joshua. You saved her life. I don't know what to say." Astra stirred, her bioluminescence intensifying, pulsing with a soft lavender light. A subtle shift, almost imperceptible, but it was there. They watched, their breath held captive in their chests, as Astra's condition slowly stabilized. Cautious optimism filled the room, a fragile hope flickering in the darkness. Then they heard it. Footsteps, approaching the facility. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. Someone was coming. The footsteps belonged to 2 station security officers, their heavy boots echoing on the metal floor. The energy surge hadn't gone unnoticed. "Routine security check," the lead officer announced, his voice amplified by his helmet's comm system. He gestured to his partner, who moved to flank Joshua and Zara. "Energy spike registered in this sector. Restricted gene therapy facility. Unauthorized access is a Class A violation." Zara stepped forward, her voice smooth and confident. "Officers, I assure you, everything is in order. I am Dr. Zara Venteris, lead researcher on Project Chimera. We are conducting authorized research on xenobiological compatibility. This," she gestured to Astra, "is a test subject." The officer narrowed his eyes, his gaze lingering on Astra. "Xenobiological compatibility? In an unauthorized facility? And without the correct authorization?" Zara held a datapad, her fingers moving fast. "Authorization is being updated. Procedures, you know. We had to speed up the project. Time is of the essence." Astra, sensing the tension, whimpered softly. Her fur, usually a soft twilight hue, flickered with patches of pale violet, the bioluminescence erratic and unsettling. Joshua placed a comforting hand on her back, but she flinched, her large purple eyes wide with fear. The second officer, a hulking figure with a cybernetic arm, ran a scanner over Astra. A sharp beep echoed through the room. He frowned, his eyes widening slightly. "Genetic marker detected. Eliani designation Astra 7. Flagged as person of interest." The lead officer's demeanor hardened. "Dr. Venteris, with all due respect, your explanation is insufficient. This facility is off limits without proper authorization, and this test subject is flagged for immediate detainment. I'm going to need you to hand her over." Joshua's hand tightened on Astra's shoulder. "She's under my protection. You have no right." "We have every right," the officer retorted, his hand hovering near his sidearm. "She's a potential security threat. Protocol dictates immediate examination. She's a child," Joshua growled, his voice low and dangerous. "And I won't let you experiment on her." A tense silence descended upon the room, broken only by the hum of the gene therapy equipment and Astra's ragged breathing. The officers stood their ground, their faces grim. Zara sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Officers, perhaps we can willpower this amicably. I can assure you Astra poses no threat." "I'll cooperate, but I must check with my team and learn more." "That might be difficult," the officer stated, eyes fixed. "Hand her over, or we will be forced to use force." Suddenly, Astra cried out, a high-pitched, keening sound that resonated through the room. Her bioluminescence flared, bathing the officers in an intense purple light. The lead officer stepped back, holding his head. "What on earth?" he murmured, his eyes unfocused. "My head, everything's swirling." The gene therapy, it seemed, had triggered an unforeseen side effect. Astra's empathic abilities, already heightened, were now amplified, flooding the officer's mind with her fear, her trauma, her desperate longing for safety. The second officer, his cybernetic arm twitching erratically, reached out to steady his colleague, but he too seemed disoriented, his movements sluggish and uncoordinated. Joshua seized the opportunity. "We're leaving," he said, his voice firm. He scooped Astra into his arms and turned to Zara. "Come on." Zara hesitated for a moment, her expression conflicted. "Go, I'll cover you." "I can handle this." Joshua looked at her, his eyes filled with suspicion, but he knew he had no choice. He couldn't risk Astra's safety. "Thank you," he said, his voice tight with emotion. He turned and fled, Astra clinging to him tightly, her small body trembling. He navigated the maze of corridors, his heart pounding in his chest. "This way," Astra whispered, her voice barely audible. I remember." She pointed to a maintenance panel, her small hand trembling as she reached for the release lever. A hidden passage concealed behind the panel opened before them. "How did you know about this?" Joshua asked, his voice filled with wonder. "Memory," she mumbled, her eyes unfocused. Before the screams." He didn't press her. He knew that pushing her too hard would only trigger more trauma. He trusted her instincts. They slipped into the passage, the metal door sliding shut behind them. Alert tones filled the station, rising constantly. Staff were watchful, their search ongoing. They stumbled through the narrow passage, the air thick with dust and the scent of decay. They emerged into a dimly lit corridor, deserted and forgotten. A figure emerged from the shadows, his face etched with concern. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. Joshua recognized him. He was a station engineer, a man he'd seen working on the lower decks. "We need help," Joshua said, his voice pleading. "They're after us." The engineer nodded, his eyes scanning the corridor. "I know. I saw the alert. They're saying you're a security threat." "It's not true," Joshua protested. "They're after Astra. They want to experiment on her." The engineer's gaze softened as he looked at Astra, his expression filled with sympathy. "I know about Astra," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I know about the conspiracy." "Conspiracy?" Joshua asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "They're targeting Ileani children with unique genetic traits," the engineer explained. "They believe they hold the key to unlocking new technologies, new weapons. Astra is valuable to them." Joshua's blood ran cold. He had to protect her despite the toll. He looked down at Astra, her face pale and drawn. Her breathing was shallow and labored. The gene therapy was failing. "She needs help," Joshua said, his voice desperate. "She's rejecting the therapy. She needs medical attention." The engineer shook his head. "I can't take you to the med bay. It's the first place they'll look, and I don't have the equipment to help her." "Then what do we do?" Joshua asked, his voice filled with despair. The engineer hesitated, his eyes filled with conflict. "There's someone I know, someone who might be able to help, but it's a risk, a big risk." Joshua looked at Astra, her life hanging in the balance. He had a difficult choice to make: trust Zara, who had already deceived him, or seek help from unconventional sources, potentially exposing Astra to even greater danger. Stranded in a hostile environment, hunted by station security and shadowy conspirators, Joshua and Astra's future hung precariously in the balance, their fate uncertain. "We can't stay there," Joshua had said, his voice tight as he secured Astra in his arms. "Too exposed." The memory of the station official's cold eyes still burned in his mind. He hadn't stopped running until he reached Elias's hidden entrance, a nondescript access panel tucked away behind a hydroponics bay. Now he kicked the metal door shut behind him, the clang echoing in the cramped space. Elias, a wiry man with grease-stained fingers and eyes that darted nervously, rushed forward. "Joshua! What happened?" And the girl. He reached out, his touch gentle as he examined Astra's pale face. "Her condition? It's worse than I feared. The gene therapy rejection is accelerating. We need to act now." Joshua lowered Astra onto a makeshift cot, cobbled together from salvaged cushions and metal plating. The air in the hideout, thick with the scent of ozone and machine oil, did little to ease her labored breathing. "What do you mean? Act? What can we do?" Elias ran a diagnostic scanner over Astra's small form, the device humming softly. The original therapy was designed to enhance certain Eliani traits, specifically their empathic abilities. But someone, he glanced at Joshua, his expression grim, tampered with it. They were trying to weaponize her. "Weaponize?" Joshua's voice was a low growl. "There's a conspiracy, Joshua. A group within the consortium who believe Eliani children with specific genetic markers can be exploited. Their empathic abilities can be amplified, turned into living weapons, interrogation tools. They can break down a target's mental defenses, extract information, inflict unimaginable pain." Astra shuddered, a low moan escaping her lips. Then her body stiffened. Her twilight-colored fur bristled, and her eyes rolled back in her head. She began to convulse, her small limbs jerking violently against the cot. "Astra!" Joshua knelt beside her, his hands hovering helplessly. "Elias, do something!" Elias grabbed a syringe filled with a milky fluid. "This is unconventional. A modified version of the original gene therapy. It might counteract the rejection, stabilize her system. But it's risky, Joshua. There could be side effects. And the success rate." He trailed off, his gaze meeting Joshua's. "It's low." Another seizure racked Astra's body, her small form arching against the cot. Joshua's heart clenched. He had to make a choice, a flicker of memory. Zara hunched over her research, muttering about gene sequences and empathic amplification. The image dissolved, replaced by Elias's anxious face. "Joshua, we don't have much time." He closed his eyes, the weight of the decision crushing him. Save her, or risk making things worse? Was he even qualified to make this call? He thought of Astra's parents, the screams, the shattering light. He couldn't fail her. He opened his eyes, his gaze firm. "Do it." Astra, her body still trembling, looked at him. Her violet eyes, usually so bright, were clouded with pain, but within them he saw something else, unwavering trust, a silent affirmation. Elias nodded, his face etched with determination. He carefully injected the modified gene therapy into Astra's arm. The room fell silent, save for the soft hum of the scanner and Astra's ragged breathing. As the fluid entered her system, Astra's eyes widened. Her fur began to glow with an eerie internal light. A wave of emotion crashed over Joshua, raw and overwhelming. He felt Astra's terror, her grief, her loneliness, amplified 1,000-fold. He staggered back, clutching his head, the force of her trauma threatening to drown him. Elias cried out, his face contorted in pain. "The empathic surge, it's uncontrolled!" A heavy knock echoed through the hideout. A voice cold and authoritative, cut through the chaos. "Elias, open up. This is Director Valerius. We know you're in there." Elias froze, his eyes wide with fear. "Valerius, he's here." Joshua grabbed Astra, pulling her close. The empathic surge was still building, threatening to overwhelm him. He had to protect her. Elias wrung his hands, his gaze darting nervously between Joshua and the door. I don't know what to do." Valerius's voice, closer now, sent a shiver down Joshua's spine. "Elias, we have reason to believe you are harboring a fugitive. Open the door, or we will be forced to breach it." Joshua knew they were compromised. Somehow Valerius had found them. He had to act fast. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on a narrow opening in the wall, a maintenance tunnel barely wide enough for him to squeeze through. It was their only chance. "Help me," he hissed at Elias, his voice urgent. "We need to hide her." Elias hesitated, his face pale. "But, Valerius." "Now, Elias." Together, they lifted Astra and gently placed her inside the tunnel. Joshua ripped a section of metal plating from a nearby shelf and wedged it across the opening, creating a makeshift barrier. Valerius's voice boomed from the other side of the door. "Elias, this is your final warning." The door buckled inward with a crash. Joshua pushed himself deeper into the shadows as Valerius, a tall, imposing figure in a pristine uniform, strode into the room, followed by two heavily armed security guards. "Where is she, Elias?" Valerius's voice was like ice. Elias stammered, his hands trembling. I don't know what you're talking about, Director." "I haven't seen anyone." Valerius's eyes narrowed, his gaze sweeping across the room. He stopped, his attention fixed on the section of metal plating concealing the maintenance tunnel. He took a step closer. Inside the tunnel, Astra whimpered. Her body was racked with fever, and the empathic surge was still raging within her. Fragmented images flashed through her mind. A lush green forest, a towering waterfall, a symbol etched into the bark of a tree, a spiral within a circle. Her parents, a hidden place, home. Valerius reached out, his fingers brushing against the metal plating. Joshua held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. Suddenly, Elias cried out, "Director, wait!" "I can explain." He lunged forward, grabbing Valerius's arm. "There's a malfunction in the power grid. I need to show you." Valerius hesitated, his gaze shifting from the tunnel to Elias. "A malfunction? Now?" "This is hardly the time, Elias. But, Director, it's critical. The entire sector could lose power." Valerius sighed, his expression hardening. "Very well. Show me." He gestured to his guards. "Search the premises thoroughly." Elias led Valerius and the guards away, his voice rising in a frantic explanation about power conduits and overloaded circuits. Joshua waited, his muscles tense, until the sound of their footsteps faded into the distance. Then he carefully removed the metal plating and peered into the tunnel. Astra was unconscious, her body limp. He gently lifted her into his arms, her fur damp with sweat. "We have to get out of here," he whispered, his voice tight with tenacity. He plunged into the labyrinthine maintenance tunnels, the darkness swallowing them whole. The pursuit was relentless. The sound of Valerius's security forces echoed through the tunnels, growing closer with each passing moment. Joshua, fueled by adrenaline and desperation, navigated the twisting passages, his engineering knowledge guiding him through the maze. He spotted a section of weakened support beams, a perfect opportunity. Working quickly, he rigged a makeshift trap, severing the beams with a salvaged cutting torch. A section of the tunnel collapsed with a deafening roar, sending dust and debris flying. The pursuit faltered, the security forces momentarily hindered by the cave-in, but it wouldn't hold them for long. He pressed onward, his breath ragged, Astra's weight heavy in his arms. But then, her body went limp. He stopped, his heart sinking. Astra's eyes were closed, her skin clammy. She wasn't breathing. "Astra!" He shook her gently, his voice filled with panic. "Astra, wake up!" Nothing. He was trapped, cornered, and Astra was dying in his arms. A voice, cold and devoid of emotion, echoed through the tunnel. "It's over, Joshua. There's nowhere left to run. Surrender the girl, and I promise you a quick death. Refuse, and you will both suffer." Valerius stepped into view, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. He raised his weapon, the barrel pointed directly at Joshua's head. "The choice is yours." Zara was working with Valerius all along. Joshua's voice was a low growl, the revelation settling like a stone in his gut. Valerius stepped forward, his expression a mask of calculated composure. Indeed, Zara understood the potential. You, however, are proving resistant. But perhaps I can offer a different incentive. He paused, his gaze fixed on Astra. "I need her alive, Joshua. The gene therapy unlocked something, a latent potential within her species, something that could revolutionize medicine, energy production, countless fields. But it requires a living subject, someone with Astra's specific genetic markers." He extended a hand, palm open in a gesture that felt more like a snare than an invitation. "Join me, Joshua. Help me unlock this technology, and I promise you wealth beyond your wildest dreams. Safety for both of you. Astra will be well cared for, studied in a comfortable environment. Think of the good we could do." Joshua stared at Valerius, his face hardening. "You'd exploit a child? Use her as a lab rat for your own gain?" His voice was low, dangerous. "You sicken me." Valerius's composure cracked, a flicker of anger in his eyes. "This isn't exploitation, it's progress. It's saving lives, my daughter." He cut himself off, regaining control. "Don't be a fool, old man. You can't protect her forever. I have resources, influence. You have a wrench and a stubborn streak. Join me, or I promise you, you'll both regret it." Joshua's response was immediate. He ignored Valerius's outstretched hand, instead reaching out and scooping Astra into his arms. "I'd rather die than see you lay a hand on her." He turned, plunging deeper into the maze of maintenance tunnels, his boots echoing on the metal grating. "You're making a mistake, Joshua." Valerius's voice echoed after them, filled with frustration and a hint of desperation. "A fatal one." The tunnels were a claustrophobic labyrinth of pipes, conduits, and flickering lights. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and stale recycled air. Water dripped from corroded pipes, forming puddles on the grimy floor. Joshua moved quickly, his years of navigating the station's underbelly serving him well. Astra clung to him, her small body trembling. "Where are we going, Joshua?" "Somewhere he can't find us, Starflower," he said, his voice strained. "Somewhere safe." As they rounded a corner, a hissing sound filled the air, followed by the acrid stench of chemicals. A ruptured pipe spewed a cloud of greenish gas into the tunnel. Joshua coughed, his eyes watering. "Toxic gas," he muttered. He ripped a piece of cloth from his shirt, soaking it in a puddle of water. Hold this over your face, Astra. It won't stop everything, but it'll help. He pressed the damp cloth to her face, ensuring it covered her nose and mouth. He then found another scrap of cloth and covered his own mouth. The gas stung his lungs, making it hard to breathe. He spotted a damaged ventilation duct nearby. With a grunt, he pried it open, creating a makeshift exhaust. The gas began to dissipate, slowly clearing the air. Astra coughed, her purple eyes wide with fear. I see a way, Joshua. Her voice was faint, almost a whisper. A hidden path. To the left. Joshua hesitated. You see a path. What do you mean? Astra's eyes glazed over for a moment, her body trembling slightly. The tunnels, they show me. A way out, a place Valerius doesn't know. He trusted her implicitly. All right, Starflower. Lead the way. Astra pointed to a section of wall that appeared seamless. Behind there, a passage. Joshua examined the wall. It was indeed a hidden door, cleverly concealed within the tunnel's structure. He found a release mechanism, and with a click, the door slid open, revealing a narrow, dark passage. As they entered the hidden passage, the hum of approaching drones filled the air. Red lights flickered in the distance, growing closer. He's sending drones after us, Joshua said grimly. We need to move faster. Flashback. Zara's voice, sharp and urgent, echoed in Joshua's mind. The gene therapy. It can unlock incredible potential in Eliani children. But it's dangerous, Joshua. It can also trigger empathic overload. Their minds, they can become unstable, overwhelmed by the emotions of others, especially if they're exposed to trauma or stress. Astra stumbled, her hand flying to her head. Too much, too many feelings. Joshua knelt beside her, his face etched with concern. What's wrong, Starflower? The drones. They're scared, angry, hunting. Her voice was strained, her body trembling violently. Suddenly, a wave of energy pulsed from Astra, a shimmering aura of purple light that washed over the tunnel. The humming of the drones sputtered and died. The red lights flickered and went out. What happened? Joshua asked, his voice filled with awe. Astra blinked, her eyes clearing. I don't know. I just wanted them to stop. The tunnel ahead collapsed with a deafening roar. Dust and debris filled the air, blocking their path. Great, Joshua muttered. Just great. He coughed, waving away the dust. He examined the collapsed section, his eyes scanning for any sign of stability. Looks like we're going to have to find another way around. This section's too unstable to clear. Joshua. Valerius's voice echoed through the tunnels, closer now. It's time to stop running. You can't protect her forever. I'm not giving up, Joshua shouted back, his voice filled with defiance. Valerius's voice softened, taking on a tone of pained sincerity. You don't understand, Joshua, my daughter. She was an Eliani hybrid. She died because of genetic complications. Complications that this technology could have prevented. I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing it so no one else has to suffer the same loss. Joshua paused, his anger momentarily tempered by a flicker of understanding. He knew what it was like to lose a child. The pain, the emptiness. It was a wound that never truly healed. Astra stirred in his arms, her eyes fluttering open. No more hurt, Joshua, she whispered, her voice weak but firm. Please, no more fighting. Joshua looked at Astra, her face pale and drawn. He looked at the collapsed tunnel, the pursuing drones, the approaching voice of Valerius. He looked at the exposed wires sparking erratically near a leaking water pipe. An idea sparked in his mind. "Stay here, Starflower," he said, gently placing her on the ground. "I'm going to buy us some time." He moved quickly, his hands working with practiced ease. He connected the exposed wires to the water pipe, creating a makeshift booby trap. "That should slow them down," he muttered, stepping back. He returned to Astra, scooping her back into his arms. They continued deeper into the tunnels, the sound of approaching footsteps growing closer. They reached a dead end, a solid wall of metal blocking their path. "We're trapped," Joshua said, his voice resigned. Valerius emerged from the shadows, his face a mask of relentless drive. Security guards flanked him, their weapons trained on Joshua and Astra. "It's over, Joshua," Valerius said, his voice cold and hard. "There's no escape anymore." He nodded to one of the aides who came ahead, holding a vial filled with clear fluid. "I have a protein regulator here, a final amount. Unless you surrender Astra willingly, I'll administer it. And believe me, I will." Astra's eyes widened in fear. "Joshua." "No," Joshua said, his voice firm. "I won't let you touch her." "Then you leave me no choice," Valerius said, his hand gesturing to the guard with the syringe. "Stop!" Astra cried out, her voice surprisingly strong. She looked at Joshua, her purple eyes filled with a mixture of fear and grit. "It's okay, Joshua. I'll go with him, if it means you'll be safe." Joshua stared at Astra, his heart breaking. "No, Starflower," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I won't let you sacrifice yourself for me." Valerius stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "The choice is yours, Joshua. Her life, or yours." Joshua stood frozen, Astra cradled in his arms, the syringe looming closer. An impossible choice. Joshua's hand moved, a blur of practiced motion. He gripped the injector, the metallic chill a stark contrast to the heat rising in his chest. Not into her. Never. He pressed the device against Astra's neck, feigning the injection, his thumb subtly manipulating the release catch. A faint click echoed in the tense silence as he disabled the firing mechanism. Valerius's face contorted. "You fool! You think you can defy me?" he snarled, gesturing sharply. "Seize them!" Two hulking guards surged forward, weapons raised, before Joshua could react. A wave of something washed over the room. A disorienting ripple blurred the edges of his vision. The guards stumbled, their movements sluggish, their eyes unfocused. It was Astra. Her small form trembled, a faint purple light emanating from her fur. She was the source of the wave, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Now, Astra!" Joshua yelled, grabbing her hand. He knew this wouldn't last. He'd seen the flicker of pain in her eyes, the strain on her small body. He'd have to make this quick. He yanked a panel off the wall, exposing a tangle of wires. Years of station maintenance flooded back. He knew this system, knew its weaknesses. A few precise cuts, a quick rerouting of power, and a small contained explosion ripped through the corridor, filling it with acrid smoke. "Vents! Now!" he coughed, pulling Astra along. He knew the layout of this station like the back of his hand. He'd spent decades crawling through its underbelly, fixing its forgotten corners. They squeezed into a narrow access panel, the metal biting into their skin. The darkness swallowed them whole. The sounds of pursuit echoed behind them, growing fainter as they plunged deeper into the station's labyrinthine vent system. "Which way, Starflower?" Joshua whispered, his voice hoarse. He couldn't see a thing. Astra's small hand tightened in his, left, then right, then down. Her voice was barely audible, but her guidance was precise. He trusted her. He had to. The vents twisted and turned, a claustrophobic maze of metal and dust. The air grew thick, heavy. Joshua tasted something acrid, metallic, gas. He muttered, recognizing the telltale signs of a sleep-inducing agent. Valerius was cutting off their escape, anticipating their every move. He ripped a strip of cloth from his shirt, rummaged in his pocket for the small charcoal filter he always carried, a habit from his days working in the station's grimy engine rooms. He quickly fashioned a makeshift mask, pressing it to Astra's face. "Breathe through this, little one," he instructed, his voice muffled. "It won't stop everything, but it'll help." They pressed on, the gas stinging their eyes and throats. The vents seemed to descend deeper, the metal growing hotter. A low, rhythmic hum vibrated through the structure. "Where are we going, Astra?" Joshua gasped, his lungs burning. "Core, reactor core," she whispered, her voice strained. Suddenly, the vent opened into a large circular chamber. The central reactor core dominated the space, a massive, pulsating sphere of contained energy. Warning lights flashed, casting the room in an ominous red glow. Security cameras swiveled, their lenses glinting in the dim light. Then, a klaxon blared, shattering the tense silence. A synthesized voice boomed through the station. "Attention all personnel. Security breach reported in Sector Gamma. Joshua Davis and an unknown associate are potentially harmful. Lockdown initiated. All personnel are to report to their designated security stations." Joshua cursed under his breath. Valerius had turned the entire station against them. Astra gasped, clutching her head. Images flooded her mind, a chaotic jumble of flashing lights and screaming alarms. "It's unstable," she whimpered, her eyes wide with terror. "The reactor, it's going to break." A wave of dizziness washed over Joshua. He stumbled, catching himself against the cool metal of the reactor casing. This was bad, worse than he imagined. Flashback. Zara's face was grim, her voice low and urgent. "The empathic abilities of the Eliani are powerful, Joshua, but they can be destabilizing. If left unchecked, they can overwhelm the individual, even destroy them. Suppression is often the only option. It's not ideal, but it's necessary." End flashback. Astra's vision. Zara's warning, it all clicked into place. They weren't just running from Valerius. They were running from a catastrophe. Suddenly, 2 security officers rounded a corner, weapons drawn. They froze, their eyes widening as they spotted Joshua and Astra. "Davis, stand down. You are under arrest for acts of terrorism." Joshua's mind raced. He could try to explain, but they wouldn't listen. They were already primed to see him as a threat. He could fight, but he didn't want to hurt them. They were just doing their jobs. He reached into his pocket, his fingers closing around a small EMP device he'd salvaged from a damaged security drone. It wouldn't kill them, but it would disable their weapons, give them a chance to escape. He looked at Astra, her eyes pleading. He had to protect her, but he also had to protect the station. He activated the EMP, a silent pulse of energy rippling through the air. The security officers crumpled to the ground, their weapons clattering against the metal floor. He ran to the reactor core, his eyes scanning the complex network of pipes and conduits. He recognized the signs immediately: deliberate sabotage. Someone had tampered with the cooling system, overloading the core. His comm crackled to life. Valerius's voice, cold and triumphant, filled the chamber. "Impressive, Davis. You've made it further than I anticipated, but it ends here. I've destabilized the reactor. Unless my demands are met within the hour, I will trigger a complete meltdown. The entire station will be vaporized." Joshua's expression resolute. "What do you want, Valerius?" "Control," Valerius hissed. "I want control of this station. I want the power that is rightfully mine. And if I can't have it, no one will." Astra tugged at his sleeve, her eyes filled with tears. "Joshua, we have to stop him. All those people." He looked at her small, vulnerable form. He thought of Zara, of her warnings of the potential dangers of Astra's powers. He thought of the station, of the thousands of innocent lives at stake. He faced an impossible choice: save Astra from Valerius's grasp, or prevent the destruction of the station. Which would he choose? He chose both. The impossible choice, the only choice. The station's inhabitants, yes, but Astra. Astra was more than life itself. The alarms shrieked, a discordant symphony of impending doom. Red lights pulsed, painting the grimy corridors in a hellish glow. Visual displays flickered, numbers climbing, lines trending towards catastrophic failure. Reactor criticality, imminent meltdown. Then Valerius's voice, amplified across the station's comms, cut through the chaos. "Citizens of Elysium Station, Joshua Davis damaged our reactor. He seeks to harm us all. I have started safety measures. All residents go to assigned safe areas. Any resistance will be met with lethal force. For the safety of Elysium, we must stand united against this threat." His voice dripped with manufactured urgency, a calculated manipulation of fear. Astra cried out, a sharp, keening sound that tore at Joshua's heart. She clutched her head, her small body trembling violently. It hurts, Joshua, so much. Fear. Pain. Her fur shimmered erratically, reflecting the chaotic energy of the station. Her empathic abilities, usually a source of connection, were now a conduit for the collective terror of thousands. Joshua held her close, trying to shield her from the psychic onslaught. "It's okay, Starflower. I'm here. Just breathe. Focus on me." But even his presence couldn't fully block the flood of agony. He had to do something, anything. He raced towards the reactor control room, Astra clinging to his back. He bypassed security locks with practiced ease, his fingers flying across the console. He needed to manually override the system, buy them some time, find a solution. But the reactor was too far gone. The core was unstable, the containment fields weakening. His efforts were futile, a desperate attempt to hold back a tsunami with a bucket. Suddenly, a fragmented message crackled across his comm, barely audible above the alarms. It was Zara. "Valerius. Revenge. Station administration. Years ago. Family. Accident. Don't trust." The signal faded, lost in the electronic storm. But the message was clear. Valerius wasn't trying to save the station, he was trying to destroy it. This wasn't about security, it was about vengeance. A searing image flashed through Joshua's mind. A corridor, much like this one, but cleaner, brighter. Children laughing, a woman's gentle smile. Then a blinding flash, a deafening roar, and nothing. He blinked, the memory fading, leaving only a cold ache in his chest. Valerius had lost his family here, years ago in a reactor accident the station administration had covered up. Grief, twisted and festering, had become a weapon. Astra whimpered, her voice strained. It's alive, Joshua. The reactor, it's hurting like a giant, wounded animal. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural intensity, reflecting the reactor's chaotic energy. She wasn't just sensing the fear of the inhabitants, she was feeling the reactor's own distress, its struggle against criticality. A gruff voice startled them. "Davis? What in the hell do you think you're doing?" A station engineer, a burly man named Krill, stood in the doorway, his face etched with suspicion. Valerius said. "Joshua cut him off. Valerius is lying. He wants to disable the station. My friend heard a message. He lost loved ones in the Sector 7 incident. The Council concealed it. This is revenge." Krill hesitated, his eyes darting between Joshua, Astra, and the flashing displays. "That doesn't make any sense. Why would he kill everyone?" "Because grief makes people do crazy things," Joshua said, his voice tight. "And because he thinks he's doing what's right. People are easy to manipulate when they're scared." He pointed to the console. "I'm trying to stabilize the reactor, but I can't do it alone. I need the override schematics." "The ones they don't want anyone to see." Krill's face hardened. "Those are classified. I can't just." He glanced at Astra, her face pale and drawn. He looked back at Joshua, seeing the desperation in his eyes. After a long moment, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a data chip. "Don't tell anyone where you got this. If Valerius finds out..." Joshua took the chip, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. "Thank you, Krill. You're doing the right thing." Valerius's voice boomed across the comms again, even more urgent now. "This is your final warning, Joshua Davis. Surrender Astra and relinquish control of the reactor, or I will initiate a full-core shutdown. You have 5 minutes." Joshua ignored him, plugging the data chip into the console. The schematics flooded the screen, a complex web of circuits and energy pathways. He studied them frantically, searching for a solution. "Joshua," Astra's voice was weak, barely a whisper. I can feel it. The reactor, it's too much. I can dampen it, maybe stabilize it." Zara's fragmented message echoed in Joshua's mind. "Dampen, irreversible damage." Empathic senses. "No," Joshua roared, his voice filled with anguish. "Absolutely not, Astra." "I won't let you risk yourself like that." Astra looked at him, her purple eyes filled with a heartbreaking mixture of pain and commitment. "But the people, Joshua, they're all going to die." He gripped her shoulders, his voice trembling. "I won't let that happen. I'll find another way. I promise." But deep down, he knew there was no other way. Save Astra or save the station. An impossible choice. Except, what if there was a third option? Krill, who had been watching the exchange in silence, spoke up. There's a maintenance access point, directly into the reactor core. It's shielded, but energy levels will be elevated. There's a manual control system inside. Chancy, but..." Joshua looked at him, his mind churning. Access the reactor center? Madness. But what option was there? "Astra," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "I have to go in there." "No, Joshua. It's too dangerous," Astra cried, tears welling in her eyes. "I know, Starflower, but it's the only way. But I need your help. I need you to guide me." "But Zara said..." "I know what Zara said," Joshua interrupted. "But I need you to trust me. I need you to use your gift to guide me through the safest paths." "But the radiation..." "We'll figure it out," Joshua said, his voice filled with a drive he didn't feel. "We always do. He looked at Krill. "Where is it?" Krill pointed to a barely visible access panel hidden behind a tangle of wires. "Good luck, Davis. You're going to need it." Joshua took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. He activated his environmental suit, the familiar hiss of oxygen filling his ears. He looked at Astra, her face pale and drawn. "Ready, Starflower?" Astra nodded, her eyes shining with commitment. "Ready." With a final glance at Krill, Joshua opened the access panel and stepped into the darkness. The air crackled with energy, the hum of the reactor growing louder with each step. Astra's voice, clear and strong in his ear, guided him through the maze of pipes and wires. "Left now, right. Careful. There's a surge. Here." Higher. As he navigated the treacherous pathways, Valerius's voice echoed in his corn, distorted and filled with rage. "Davis, you can't stop me." "You have no idea what they did. They covered it up. My wife, my children. They died because of their incompetence. They will all pay." A raw, unfiltered grief poured through the comms, a torrent of pain and despair. He was almost there. The override console, a small, unassuming panel, was just ahead. But as he reached for it, Astra cried out, her voice filled with terror. "Joshua!" "Behind you!" He whirled around, just as a searing blast of radiation slammed into him, knocking him off his feet. The world dissolved into a blinding white light. He was dying. But even as the radiation burned through his suit, he saw it. The override switch. His hand, guided by Astra's desperate plea, reached out, his fingers closing around the switch. Which way to flip it? "Which way to flip it?" Joshua muttered, squinting at the schematic projected from his wrist-mounted datapad. It was a cross-section of the reactor core, a chaotic mess of pipes, conduits, and radiation shielding. The air tasted like ozone and metal filings. Sweat beaded on his forehead, stinging his eyes. He wiped it away with the back of his grimy hand. "All right, Starflower, talk to me." "Where's that bypass valve?" Astra shivered, her fur dripping despite the oppressive heat. "Left, past the hissing pipe. It hurts, Joshua." "The metal is screaming." She pressed her small hands to her temples, her purple eyes wide with distress. So much fear. He knelt beside her, his weathered face etched with concern. "I know, sweetheart. Just a little further. We're almost there. Focus on my voice, okay? Block out the noise." He placed a hand on her shoulder, feeling her tremble. "You're doing great." He navigated the narrow passage, squeezing past a tangle of sparking wires. The Geiger counter on his belt clicked frantically, a constant reminder of the invisible danger. A distorted voice crackled over the station's .com system. "Traitors and saboteurs. Joshua Davis, endangering the lives of every citizen. Valerius will restore order. Security is paramount." It was Valerius, his voice amplified and distorted, spewing propaganda. Joshua gritted his teeth. "He's really laying it on thick," he muttered. Suddenly, the broadcast sputtered and glitched, replaced by a burst of static. Then Valerius's voice returned, but it was fragmented and distorted, as if someone were deliberately interfering. Deep within the station's broadcast center, a middle-aged engineer with tired eyes worked furiously at a console, rerouting signals and injecting subtle glitches into the broadcast feed. Guilt gnawed at him, a constant companion since Valerius had seized control. He couldn't stand by and watch the station be consumed by lies. Joshua reached the bypass valve, a massive, corroded wheel. He wrestled with it, his muscles straining. It wouldn't budge. Damn it, he cursed under his breath. Joshua, Astra whimpered. It's getting worse, the pain. It's like a fire. Just then, Valerius's voice, clear and cold, cut through the comm system. Davis, I know you're in there. I know what you're trying to do, but you're wasting your time. The reactor is beyond saving. Like hell it is, Joshua retorted, his voice echoing in the confined space. You think you're a hero, Davis? A savior? You're a fool. Do you even know the truth about what happened here? About the accident that started all this? Joshua paused, his hand still on the valve. What are you talking about? The accident wasn't sabotage, Davis. It was corporate negligence. A faulty reactor design, ignored safety protocols, and a cover-up by the station's administration. They sacrificed lives for profit, and now you're risking yours to protect them. Joshua's grip tightened on the valve. Doubt gnawed at him. Was Valerius telling the truth? Had he been fighting for the wrong side? Astra reached out, her small hand covering his. Joshua, she said softly, her voice strained but firm. It doesn't matter. Not now. People are still in danger. We have to stop the reactor. He looked at her, her purple eyes filled with a wisdom beyond her years. She was right. He couldn't afford to get bogged down in the past. Lives were at stake. All right, Starflower, he said, his voice regaining its commitment. Let's get this done. Suddenly, a voice crackled over his corn. It was the engineer. Davis, can you hear me? The override terminal. It's heavily damaged. You'll need to reroute the power couplings and bypass the safety interlock. I'll guide you through it. I'm listening, Joshua said, his heart pounding with renewed hope. First, you'll need to. The engineer's voice was cut off by a burst of static. Then, a new voice, cold and metallic, replaced it. Engineer 47, you are in violation of station regulations. Cease your unauthorized communications immediately. Too late, the engineer muttered, his fingers flying across the console. I've already given him what he needs. Valerius's voice, imbued with fury, returned to the comm system. Enforcers, apprehend Engineer 47. He is to be considered a traitor to the station. Astra gasped, her eyes widening. Joshua, they're coming. To the engineer. They're almost there. Damn it, Joshua cursed. He knew what he had to do. In the broadcast center, the engineer heard the heavy footsteps of the enforcers approaching. He knew he couldn't escape, but he could buy Joshua some time. With a grim smile, he initiated a series of system overrides, triggering alarms and locking down the broadcast center. Sorry, boys, he muttered. Gotta make a little noise. Back in the reactor core, Joshua worked feverishly, following the engineer's instructions. Sparks flew as he rerouted power couplings and bypassed safety interlocks. The air grew hotter, the radiation levels higher. Finally, he reached the activation switch. He took a deep breath and flipped it. The reactor shuddered violently. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and the ground vibrated beneath his feet. But the meltdown, it didn't stop. It only slowed down. It's not enough, Astra cried, her voice filled with despair. It's still burning. Valerius's voice, triumphant and chilling, echoed over the comm system. Did you really think you could stop me, Davis? I've already initiated the final sequence. The reactor will reach critical mass within minutes. There's nothing you can do to stop it now. Astra closed her eyes, focusing her senses. No, she whispered. There's something, a frequency, the core. It's resonating at a specific frequency. If we can match it, Maybe we can neutralize the meltdown." Joshua stared at her, his face etched with disbelief. "What are you talking about, Astra?" "That's impossible." "I can feel it, Joshua," she insisted. "I can feel the energy. If I can just tune my empathy, I can match the frequency and stop it." "No," Joshua shouted, his voice filled with fear. "It's too dangerous, Astra. I won't let you risk yourself like that." "But we have to try, Joshua," she pleaded, her purple eyes shining with dedication. "It's our responsibility. All those people, we can't let them die." Suddenly, the comm system crackled to life again. It was the engineer, his voice weak and garbled. "Davis, Astra, the frequency. She's right, the core. 72 kilohertz. Match it." Then, silence. Joshua looked at Astra, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew what he had to do. He had to trust her. He had to have faith. He took a deep breath and nodded. "All right, Starflower," he said, his voice trembling but firm. "Let's do it." Astra began to focus, her small brow furrowed in concentration. The air around her shimmered, not with heat, but with an unseen energy, a resonance that vibrated in Joshua's teeth. He could feel the effort radiating from her, a tangible force pushing against the chaotic hum of the reactor. Joshua worked feverishly, stripping wires from discarded panels, rerouting power conduits. He layered sheets of scavenged plasteel and a strange fibrous mineral he'd found clinging to the station's hull, a natural energy dampener, if his readings were correct. He was building a cage, a Faraday cage of sorts, around Astra, hoping to shield her from the worst of the reactor's destructive energies. Elsewhere, Valerius's voice, amplified across the station's comms, was cold and devoid of remorse. "Necessary measures to ensure the safety of the majority. The reactor core will be sealed. Any resistance will be met with force." The words were a death knell, a promise of isolation and destruction. A flicker of static, then a burst of distorted sound. Somewhere, deep within the station, the captured engineer was being questioned. Joshua imagined the scene. Harsh lights, brutal faces, the metallic tang of fear. But the engineer held, his silence a fragile shield against Valerius's plan. Astra gasped, a sound like tearing fabric. Sweat beaded on her twilight-colored fur. Her bright violet eyes, usually so clear, were dimmed with sorrow. The energy field she was making was a weak thing, broken by the core's strong force. Joshua watched, his heart hurting. He saw the tremor in her small hands, the way her breath hitched in her throat. He wanted to pull her away, to protect her from this madness, but he knew what was at stake. The station, the lives of thousands, hung in the balance, and Astra, somehow, was the key. Valerius's voice, now permeated with a disturbing calm, filled the reactor core. "We are cleansing this station of corruption, of weakness. We are forging a new order, one built on strength and purity." His words were a twisted justification, a perversion of order and justice. Astra's eyes flickered open, unfocused, distant. A memory, unbidden, flooded her mind. Her parents, bathed in the blue glow of a similar energy project, their faces etched with concentration. A complex equation, a series of interlocking waveforms, flashed before her eyes, a key, perhaps, to stabilizing the reactor. "Papa, the shield, the lines." "Crisscross," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the reactor's roar. Joshua's hands moved with practiced speed, guided by Astra's fragmented memory. He reconfigured the plasteel plates, creating a lattice-like structure. focusing the energy dampeners on specific points. It was a desperate gamble, but it was all they had. Then, a new voice crackled over the comms, Valerius, his tone sharp with anger. "Locate Davis. Eliminate the alien. They are interfering. The hunt had begun. They were the target now." Astra's eyes snapped open, fear replacing the distant haze. "They're coming, Papa. I feel them." Her voice was weak, but the warning was clear. Joshua grabbed a length of pipe, his fist clenched. He'd spent years patching up broken machinery, jury-rigging solutions to impossible problems. Now he would use those same skills to defend his daughter. He began setting traps, rerouting power conduits to create electrical arcs, rigging makeshift alarms with loose metal and discarded tools. Astra gasped, a jolt of energy coursing through her. The counter-effect held, a small point of balance in the storm, but it drained her. Her coat was muted, her breaths were quick. Valerius's voice echoed through the reactor core, closer now, filled with a chilling familiarity. "You think you can stop me, old man? You think you can save these people? I'm doing what needs to be done. My family. They were betrayed, abandoned. This station, it will pay the price." Joshua stepped out from behind a stack of coolant tanks, his face grim. "You're not saving anyone, Valerius. You're complicating everything." He pointed to Astra, working to keep the counter steady. "She's trying to help, and you'd hurt her just for your twisted sense of payback." Astra called out, a sound of deep worry. Her body shook, the countermeasure failing. She was near her breaking point. Joshua's mind raced. He could try to steady Astra, bring her back from trouble, but that would mean halting the process, letting the reactor fully fail. Or he could try to support her, push her further, but risk losing her completely. Then a faint, garbled signal crackled over the comms. "Davis, engineer. Still, alive. Frequency. Modulate." It was the captured engineer, his voice weak and distorted, but the message was clear. He had a solution. Astra's eyes flickered open, a spark of hope igniting within them. "Papa, the signal, use it. Amplify." Her voice was barely a whisper, but her directive was absolute. Joshua looked at Astra, her face pale and drawn, her body trembling with exhaustion. He knew the risk. It was a desperate gamble, a long shot, but he trusted her. He had to. He reached for the comms panel, his hand shaking. He didn't know if it would work. He didn't know if they would survive. But he knew he had to try. For Astra, for the station, for the hope that even in the darkest of times, a little kindness could make all the difference. The klaxons faded, replaced by the soft hum of emergency power. A green light flickered on a nearby console. The reactor. It was holding. Joshua sagged against the console, relief washing over him in a dizzying wave. Beside him, Astra trembled, her fur still faintly glowing with residual energy. Valerius screamed. A sound ripped raw from his throat and lunged. Not at the reactor, but at them. His face was a mask of fury and despair. You ruined everything." Before Joshua could react, Astra stepped forward, her small hand outstretched. A wave of shimmering purple energy pulsed outward, striking Valerius like a physical blow. He staggered back, clutching his head, his eyes wide with horror. The energy wasn't harmful, but revealing. Joshua saw Valerius's pain, his grief over lost loved ones, his burning sense of injustice, all laid bare for a moment. The station suddenly lurched as the reactor's emergency shutdown engaged. A voice, crackling with static, filled the room. Reactor core stabilized. Emergency shutdown initiated. All personnel evacuate immediately. It was the engineer, his voice weak but triumphant. He'd regained control. Valerius crumpled to his knees, sobbing. What? What have I done? The fight had gone out of him, replaced by a profound sense of shame and regret. The empathic wave had broken him, not with force, but with truth. The immediate threat was over, but the station was far from safe. Emergency lights pulsed red, illuminating the twisted metal and sparking wires. The reactor core was heavily damaged, and the entire station was in a state of emergency. Repairs would take weeks, maybe months. Joshua knelt beside Astra, pulling her close. She was exhausted, her small body trembling. "You did it, Starflower," he whispered, stroking her fur. "You saved us all." He carried her back to their small hab unit, ignoring the chaos around them. He laid her gently on the bed, covering her with a warm blanket. He sat beside her, watching her sleep, his hand resting lightly on her back. He wouldn't leave her side. Hours later, as Astra slept peacefully, a comm signal chimed. It was the engineer. His face, gaunt but smiling, appeared on the screen. "Joshua," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know how you did it, but you saved us all. Me, the station, everyone. And that little girl. She's incredible." He paused, his gaze softening. "You too? You're a family, aren't you? A real one." News of their heroism spread like wildfire throughout the station. The initial fear and suspicion gave way to awe and admiration. People started leaving gifts outside their door, nutrient paste for Astra, spare parts for Joshua, even a small hand-knitted blanket. The station's xenophobia, once so pervasive, began to crack. A few days later, a formal summons arrived. Joshua, his heart pounding, took Astra to the station administrator's office. He feared the worst. But the administrator, a stern-faced but fair woman, smiled. "Mr. Davis," she said, "in light of recent events and considering the extraordinary circumstances, the station authorities have approved your application to formally adopt Astra." Tears welled in Joshua's eyes. He knelt beside Astra, taking her small hand in his. "You're my daughter now, Starflower," he whispered. "Officially." Astra smiled, her purple eyes shining. She threw her arms around him, nuzzling her face into his neck. "Papa," she whispered, the word still new and precious on her tongue. As Astra recovered, she began to learn to control her empathic abilities. She started volunteering at the station's medical bay, using her touch to soothe patients and ease their pain. She became a symbol of hope and understanding, a living testament to the power of compassion. Joshua and Astra looked towards the future. They planned to use their combined skills and experiences to help rebuild the station, to create a more inclusive community where everyone felt safe and valued. They would start a small garden, growing earth plants and Eliane fungi side by side, a symbol of their blended family. Their story became a legend, a reminder that love and compassion could overcome even the deepest prejudice and the greatest adversity. It proved that limitations existed only in the mind, and that the strongest bonds were often forged in the most unexpected places. Years later, Joshua and Astra stood together on the station's observation deck, looking out at the stars. Astra, now a young woman, her empathic abilities honed and refined, smiled at him. "What do you see, Papa?" Joshua looked at the swirling nebulae, the distant galaxies, the infinite possibilities that lay before them. He squeezed her hand. "I see hope, Starflower," he said. "I see a future where everyone is welcome, where love knows no boundaries. And I see us, together, facing it all." The story ends with Joshua and Astra standing together, looking out at the stars, symbolizing their hope for the future and the enduring power of their found family.